We are joined now on the Warhorse Sportsbook Hotline by Brian Christopherson of Husker 24/7. BC, what's going on, man?
Oh, not a lot. How are you guys doing?
BC, I'm just so happy to talk to you. I'm almost trending. It's 2 weeks in a row. I didn't know if I would be in this position to talk to you as a peer and a coworker again, man. So good Monday to you, man, or good Wednesday to you. How are things?
Yeah, whatever day it is. Yeah, it's good to talk to you, and whatever the day may be.
Well, it's all a blur. I thought of you the other day because our schedules came out for high school, and we open up with the Omaha North Vikings. I was like, oh, how convenient. Isn't that cute? Yep. And I immediately thought of you, and I figured you'd like that because it will be a monster matchup with arguably two of the best 2025s in the state lining up to play against one another. Be fantastic.
Yeah. Well, I'll brag on my old school bit. I'm proud of like how that program has rose up since when I was in high school. We were trying, man. We were trying, but we were like 4 and 5 every year, and you'd maybe get into the 16-team playoff field. So it's been quite a jump made to be the type of program where they're in the hunt for the playoffs every year, but also there's 2 or 3 prospects. You're like, man, they're freaking good, and they're beyond that, guys who can play elsewhere beyond Nebraska, obviously. So. Yeah, that I'll look forward to that, and I'll try to be as impartial as possible, as you know.
Yeah, there were some parallels to Nebraska, right? Because I think early on, because I think people think that Coach Martin just got to North and boom, it turned around right away, right? But from 1999 on, it wasn't like that. So it started with getting guys like Philip Bates and Green and Niles Paul, and then it flipped with getting Calvin Strong and that class to come. Can that be a thing in college where it starts with a bell cow and a class? I think we saw it at Nebraska from 91 to 92, but then I also know there were the things like the Unity Council and kind of this philosophical morphing of defenses. So that mattered too. Can a class kickstart a program in 2024?
I think it's possible. I also think there's something to be said. I'm bringing this question a little bit to the in-state recruiting they did in the last class and how many guys they locked up. And I was listening to Rhule do one of his interviews the last week, and he had a funny line, but it was an interesting one about those in-state kids. He's like, they're not Huskers, they're corn Huskers. He was putting that emphasis on it. They have a little extra something to their step about this program. They've been around it. They've heard the talk radio all their lives about, they can't get over the hump. And, that's what their lives have been like with it, different than ours when we were growing up. And, they're here to do something about it. And when you have those type of guys and you can kind of multiply the numbers with those type of personalities and guys who have seen it up close, I do think there's something to be said. Now, obviously, you got to have the talent to combine with the want to, but I think there's a lot of them in this last class and in the classes to come that are in this state. And when you were asking that question, I was thinking about in-state guys, really particularly how that can jumpstart something. And, every class, recruiting class, when it's signed, I always think about there's like 3 or 4 guys in it where like even their base floor is good to me. Like I'm going to try to make this make sense, but like, even if they just hit their base floor when they're in college, I think they're going to contribute. And then I'm really excited what like the ceiling might look like. And I think there's a lot of the in-state guys who have that, where it's just like, I feel like there's going to be some level of success that they're going to bring to the program. And now it's just a matter of how high does that ceiling go up in the sky. And that's the cool part. So when you get guys like that, I brag on your son about it a little bit. I think Caleb's one of those guys where it's just like, I think he's going to contribute. It's just a matter of like, what level is that reach? And when you've got those type of players, that's an exciting thing, I think.
Yeah, I typically don't let him read my text, but I remember it's just funny that he said that because, and this is a true story, BC. This just kind of goes to show you how your feel is good. So, Dom obviously and I talk a ton, and he said, hey, it'll be cool for a Raiola who's a really good quarterback in this class to join a class with a Benning when we got to try to turn the corner. Now I'm not saying, and he said, I'm not saying Dylan is T phrase. And he joked with me because Caleb is certainly better at this stage in his career than I was at mine in high school. But it would be nice if this was the start of something cool. And I let Caleb. I'm like, hey, we're in the car, and I'm like, hey, I said this kind of gets me in my feels. And you know me, like I'm not a nostalgic guy. I don't love pictures. I don't reminisce. But I felt like that was kind of cool for Dom to say about a Raiola and a Benning. And Caleb looked dead at me and said, we're going to win. Not sure when, but we're going to win. All I know is winning. And I just was like, it sounds like something Abdul told the 92 class when we got there. He and Dwayne Harris and Dumas, they were like, we're going to win. Not sure when, but we're going to win. So it kind of allowed me in my head to dream a little bit that this is actually on the horizon.
Yeah, that definitely comes across having with this last cycle and the guys who signed, and we were putting that class to bed. But I do think when you did interviews with them, that came across to me probably more than some past years where there was just an expectation like this is going to happen. It's not a question of if, it's just a how and when. And so, yeah, that does matter too. I think when you stack up guys, and there's a lot of them in this class who have come from winning programs. Not everybody, but they're used to that sort of success. And I think it matters to find those guys where they hate losing as much as they like winning. You know what I mean? Like I think that is a big deal. Like when you can find those type of personalities anymore. And I think they've got some of them in this class, just gauging off the times I've talked to them. And obviously got to do it at a different level. We'll see how that translates. But I can see that there's some drive there with guys. And I do think in some of those instances that in-state component, or in the case of Raiola, the just the connection, the heart to Nebraska football that he's had as a child, that means a lot, and not every class has it as much as this one, I don't think.
We're talking with Brian Christopherson from Husker 24/7. BC, I'm kind of trying to listen here and go through like my mental Rolodex as Damon's talking about classes that can kick off or kind of reset a program. We've seen it not work out, right? I remember a handful of years ago, Ole Miss has the number one class in the country with like Robert Kimdiche, and it just doesn't go anywhere, right? They've got who was the Laramie Tunsil, guys like that, right? And it doesn't go anywhere, right? Because to me, the culture wasn't set when the class
not
got
just about
there,
having good
right?
players.
So getting the class matters. Do you think that you mentioned the in-state recruits, and you got my wheels turning a little bit here? Do you think the good class of in-state recruits, not just guys that, they're Nebraska guys, so we want them, but talented guys that are also from Nebraska, can help set that culture where a guy like Dylan Raiola can kind of be the bell cow that DB was talking about?
The culture's kind of already set, which is
is impressive after year one.
The cool thing, right?
Yeah.
Like cool maybe is not the word. BC has a better word. You know what I mean though, BC? Like the culture is kind of regulating itself already.
I think they poured the concrete, but like you got to let it set, right?
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
Yeah. BC?
Yeah. Yeah, well, I think both parts of it have some truth to it, but I get where Damon's coming in there. I feel like when you've heard Rhule talk in recent weeks, last year at this time, everybody's trying to figure out, and there's even some nervousness over there. What is like mat drills and stuff all about with this particular staff? Like, what does that look like? What hoops are they going to make us run through? Is it going to be something that aligns with what I'm thinking? Maybe and also, is it going to be successful for me? Guys are wondering that. And I think this year there's a feeling, just listening to the head coach speak on it, that there's a very high percentage of guys now who see like, yeah, last year was good, and I saw how I made strides as an individual player, so I believe in this. But I also learned that what I thought was great last year as far as effort, like in February or in the spring, was maybe good. It wasn't great, and it can be great. Like, it can go up more notches. And I think there's that feeling that guys see that you think you've pushed yourself to a limit, but it extends further than you realize. And when you get guys believing that, and then you get guys who come in right away and nod their head to that, this is where I would bring that part where Ravi's asking about, that are in-state guys and like, yeah, let's go, and there's no like pushing back. And then you've got veteran guys who are helping them along to say, this is how we do things around here. And then, Caleb's class in a couple of years or a year or two from now are the guys who are doing the same thing and tapping the next guy on the shoulder and say, this is how this works here. And it's going to be done this way. And so if you can just get that feeding off each other, then you've really got something. And so I think they got the ball rolling on that. I really do. And that now you hope you brought in the same type of guys who have that mindset, who want to just keep that going. And, as some winning hopefully goes with it and you add some wins, I think that makes it easier too, where it's people see the success in the W column. But I do think there was enough like individual growth from players last year, like where they thought, I got better as a player. I got my body better through what Corey Campbell and this nutrition department is doing, that I believe in this. And I'm going to tell other guys it works if you do it.
BC, I think what I was trying to communicate, which I guess I've had some hard times with a couple times this morning, but we've heard Matt Rhule talk about, okay, the coaching staff sets the standard. I think that's the culture part that DB was talking about that's already set. Mm-hmm. But then the players take the ownership. And I think that's the part I was talking about with the in-state guys that sort of take an ownership in a way that you don't always get, or they start.
But I do think you're kind of seeing it with players
that are already there.
The turnaround of Tommy Hill or Ty Robinson coming back,
okay,
or Isaac Gifford wanting to come back and play another year. Like, there's some tangible examples. Do you think, BC, to lend credibility to what Ravi's saying?
Yeah, I would say so. Tommy Hill's a good example to use.
It's unbelievable, to be honest.
Yeah,
it's come a long way.
If you think about it, last spring, like the first presser deal, like after the first practice, first day or two, Rhule like goes through a few people who aren't there, right? He just flat out names them. Tommy Hill wasn't there. Now you understand around here we're dealing with our, past coaching staffs, and I'm not saying they did it necessarily the wrong way, but if somebody like wasn't there, the thought was like, they're not there anymore. Maybe, they're like not even part of this program or whatnot. And in a couple of those cases, those guys were back within a few days or whatever. And Tommy Hill was one of them, where he's like on the field stretching, and we're taking a photo of him like a week later, and he's talking to Rhule. And then by the end of the spring, you realize like he's one of Rhule's favorite guys, just the way like loves football and kind of goes after it. And it was kind of a lesson to me about how I should have known better from reading up on Rhule at like Temple and stuff, but just because there's going to be tough love at some point with certain guys, or they might get even called out a little bit. Like the other day, Micah Mazuka sort of got that, when he got mentioned.
Great point.
How he responds to it. But in the past around here, we would have heard that and been like, okay, that's not working how we thought, and we would have just flipped it over to another. Yeah. Like moved on to another book, right? Or something, and be like, that's not an answer. And now I think you hear that, you're like, well, I don't know, but he's definitely been called out. Let's see what his answer to that is. And we've seen proof here already that there's a couple cases where guys have answered the bell to that. Tommy Hill's a great example. I mean, now he's like, thought of as one of the better players on this roster going in. I was asking people on our board, like, name you, if you had to do the EA Sports rankings, who are like your top 5 rankings for Huskers, and Tommy Hill's up there. And so he's won a lot of respect with how he bounced back, and I think they can share their stories, back to the question at hand, and say, I believe in the way this staff sort of challenges us, like, physically and mentally and all that stuff. And there's going to be times they're tough on you, but it's for your betterment. And here's what happened for me. And if you do that, maybe it can happen for you. So there are a few of those with veterans, I think, where that can definitely work. And then the in-state guys, back to that, I mean, they see it because they like live and breathe it. Even when they're in high school, I'm sure hear on the radio about all these players and stuff. Like they're in tune a little bit with what's going on with the program. And so maybe it's easy for them to kind of jump in and just grab the rope too. I don't know.
Yeah, this is beautiful, because I think one of the things, and this just because I would share early on, I'm like, gosh, I feel like I have an unnatural affinity for Coach Rhule. And what is it? I had to check myself. Am I too close? Is it just because, and I would try to talk myself out of it. But there's 2 things that I love, and I think Trev is a lot like this too, where he's not complacent. He said, the thing that I have to guard against the most with my staff, especially having young guys, is this isn't Disneyland. This place will chew you up and spit you out. You cannot rest. And you've seen, like, there's been so much turnover. Some we hear about, some we don't. He's constantly tinkering with his staff. The no-nonsense policy with a couple of his coaches, whether it's a DUI or whatever. And I tell people this all the time, BC. The 2 greatest fears that I have raising kids is peer pressure and complacency, which is why I gravitate towards culture, because it can help negate peer pressure, because then it turns into a positive culture. But complacency, which his Coach Rhule's spirit never seems settled. He's tinkering with the staff. He's critiquing coach's strengths. He said out loud about Coach Satterfield in terms of, let's play to his strengths with tight ends, and that position needs grooming. And with quarterbacks, I don't want their attention split with an offensive coordinator. And my secondary, I don't want to, carve up Coop's time because of attention to detail. Like, he guards against those 2 things, and it fits right in my wheelhouse. The 2 most dangerous things out there for people are complacency and peer pressure.
Yeah. And with the quote you were reading, he must have said about, it's not Disneyland. I've heard him kind of get to that topic a few times, where I think he's right too. Around here, we like to be positive in a way. Like, we were always trying to be like, whenever Nebraska athletics does something well, everybody really jumps aboard it and is really pumped up about it. But you can get a win or have something good happen along the way, but you also got to realize, and he said this multiple times, you're 5-7 until you're not. And you've got to work yourself out of it, and that's the only way it's going to happen. And so you can connect that to, they had a good recruiting class, so there was good headlines about it, and there is a good vibe, oh, this is going to turn around because Rhule turns stuff around in year 2 and 3 at programs he's been in the past. Well, that doesn't just happen, and he knows that, and I think his players are realizing that. You have to have those guys who say, we got to go take this. If we're going to get those 6 to 8 points we need to flip 3 or 4 games, or whatever it is to change the whole script of Nebraska football, it's got to it's got to happen now. It's got to be happening in these early mornings while we're enjoying our coffee and they're working. So I do think they're working hard to really get that mindset within their players. And it does go back. Ravi's question, I think, hits a good point, though. At some point, too,
I'm stuck on it.
Yeah. No, you got to have the players then who say, this is what Coach Rhule's about. It's also what I'm about. So, like, I adopt that, and then the guy next to me does, and eventually you're hoping like 100 guys feel that way.
Yeah, that's interesting, BC. We're talking Brian Christopherson, Husker 24/7. Yeah, I can't get past this, and I don't even remember where he said it. It might have been at the coaches clinic in Texas, like last summer, where Rhule's talking about setting the standard becoming accountability, and then taking ownership of the standard, and
or everything, right? The 60-second breakdown of a play when you run a play, snap it, get back to the huddle, be accountable, or. Sometimes BC, he'll be in a press conference and he'll say something like, hey, we put 2 in a row together, but can we handle success? Or if they lose a game and it's like, okay, well, how can we bounce back? Can we go back to work? Is it the practical application of what we talk about? Like, he's always on the gas, whether it's emotional or physical, because I don't think he likes for people to sneak up on him.
Yeah, it also makes me think, this is maybe disconnected, but the press conference recently, he brought up the end of the Maryland game. He was talking about winter conditioning, earning stuff, and he was discussing how we had this whole thing in the days that followed. Oh, they should have ran the ball there, and you kick your field goal, you go up 3 points, which, by the way, is what I thought should have happened. But I get what his point is. We ran a standard play. Everybody can run this play, like across football. It was not like a complicated play.
Yep.
And we need dudes who and as a staff, we have to be able to function in that moment and can't hide from that sort of stuff, and just realize, like, this is where you go make a play because you're a ball player, and this is what you've been building for 8 months to excel in this situation and to play the game. It's 3rd and goal from the 5. You traditionally throw the ball there and you run that play and you succeed at it, and at worst it's an incompletion. Execute it as we've built up for 8 months. And I can't appreciate, whatever you think about certain strategies of last year, there's definitely truth to that. It's like, you got to build a culture too, where it's like, no, we're going to play this game, and we're going to run the stuff we run here and not hide from it or shrink from it and all that. And I just thought it was interesting how he kind of was revisiting that, and made an overall, I think, good point about the type of mindset they have to have over there in these months as they go into this season, where they have to they have to embrace those moments and those type of things, to say that, well, let's do it. We've done this all spring. We've done this all fall camp. Let's just execute now.
That's Brian Christopherson, Husker 24/7. Incredible stuff today, BC. We appreciate.
Got another 25 minutes in you, BC?
I was going to say we could go the rest of the show on that conversation, but we appreciate you as always, BC. We'll talk to you again next week.
Yeah, thanks a lot, guys.
Thanks, B.
That's Brian Christopherson, Husker 24/7. Coming up next, we've got Kevin Suits from 1011 News in Lincoln. He will be with us on Hurrdat Sports Radio, AM 590, ESPN Omaha, ESPN Tri-Cities.